Now, I'd like to introduce LWV San Diego President, Lori Thiel.
Thank you, Kim. Hi, everybody, and thank you for taking time today to join us for this particular event. It's really important to engage with and get to know our representatives, particularly our local representatives. So we're very thankful that we have the attendees here today and our panelists here today to get to know each other and share their ideas. I just want to take a couple of minutes and invite you to our new and revised website. We just recently revised it, and it has a brand new calendar section, and it lists all of our upcoming events, including our committee meetings. And you can go there and just pop into any of our events that you'd like to that are open to the public. So I invite you to go there and take a look around. But in addition, I'd like to call particular attention to our June 3rd next Live with the League. It's going to be a conversation with our new county supervisors. It includes Nora Vargas and Tara Lawson-Reamer. It's at 2 p.m. I know that's an unusual time, but we try to accommodate our speakers whenever we need to. And so we're doing it on June 3rd at 2. I'd also like for you to take a look at the LWVC, that's the State League Convention site. I think you can still register if you'd like to attend the convention. It's a nominal fee. And it's there are workshops and all kinds of opportunities to learn more about our organization and how we operate. And similarly, on June 19th, our league, our local league here in San Diego, will host its annual meeting. It's a business meeting, but we're also going to have, by business, I mean, our members get to vote on the new slate of officers and bylaws revisions, et cetera. But we're also featuring a speaker, Susan Davis, retired Congresswoman Susan Davis, who she actually became involved in politics through her work with the League of Women Voters. So she started out in our organization and went on to become one of the longest serving congresspeople in San Diego. So we're delighted to have her speaking at our annual meeting. So you'll find information on that on our website as well. So let me just quickly check the chat and see if we can recognize anybody. Well, we don't have any elected officials in our audience today. Otherwise, I would absolutely have recognized you. We always like to recognize our public servants because I know it's a thankless task and somebody's got to do it. And we really appreciate our community stepping up and running for office and doing this work. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Ken and we'll get the program started.
All right, as a reminder, the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan, and we never support or oppose any political party or political candidate. Our mission is empowering voters and defending democracy. As you probably know, in November 2020, voters in San Diego City Council districts 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 elected new council members for 4-year terms. We invited all 5 of them, but due to the Brown Act, we can't have a majority of any council committee at an event. So today we have 3 council members joining us. You may recall that we featured 3 other council members from districts 2, 4, and 8 at a luncheon in July 2019. That video is available on our website, lwvsandiego.org. We hope it will be possible to return to in-person events next fall. Before I introduce our speakers, I'm going to play a short video message that we received yesterday afternoon from one of the council members who couldn't be with us.
Hello, League of Women Voters. It's great to be here with you today. My name is Marnie Von Wilpert. I represent us on the San Diego City Council in District 5. I really appreciate your advocacy for the Office of Child and Youth Success. We have heard you. I'm making sure that's one of my priorities in my revised budget memo. Also, I want to thank all the women's groups out there for their help on my journey to elected office. I was the only woman in my race, and I had incredible groups such as Emerge California, Run Women Run, and many others, including the League, to host events, get my name out there, make sure that all women have a platform for their voices when they're running for office. So thank you so much. We have a lot of work to do ahead of us, including protecting our beautiful outdoor spaces and beaches and taking action on climate change, making sure we address housing affordability and homelessness, and keeping our economy strong so we keep recruiting talent and good jobs to San Diego, and making sure that we treat everyone with dignity and equality and respect in our hometown. So thank you again. I'm pleased to be with you, and I hope to see you very soon.
Councilmember Joe Lacava serves as the Vice Chair of the city's Audit Committee and Active Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and is a member of the Environment Committee and Land Use and Housing Committee. Joe is a licensed civil engineer, and his career has spanned from public infrastructure to housing to public policy. He has worked on diverse issues such as housing, police, and community relations, climate change, and infrastructure. Over the past 20 years, he has sat on nearly 30 civic boards, planning groups, and commissions. Councilmember Lacava, I'll turn it over to you now.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you to the League for the invitation and the opportunity to speak with you. Having attended a number of League lunches in the past, I join in all of you and eagerly awaiting the opportunity to these in-person sessions. I've always been very impressed with the speakers and panels the League assembles and your good work here in the city. With that introduction, I will pass on the little bio of myself, and let's get to a little bit of the discussion of policy issues, both present and future, as well as your questions. As you certainly know, I'm very excited to be part of this council. First time ever that 5 brand new council members have been elected. And of course, we have a new mayor and we have an amazing group to get a lot of good work done. And we've been very, very busy for a couple of reasons. One, of course, the impact of the pandemic. And I'm very proud of how the city has reacted in terms of both responding to the needs of those that are most highly impacted, both in tenants and small businesses, how we've been able to allocate resources, convert the convention center to serve those that are homeless, and so much more. And as we hopefully begin to enter the post-pandemic era, we are still very much on top of ensuring that everybody comes out of this in as good a shape as possible, continue the tenant protections, continue the small business relief. And as you may have heard, we've decided to allow all that outdoor dining that sprung up over the past several months to continue for at least another year. And that should help the restaurants recover as they start to get back to more normal operations. We've also been very busy because there was a lot of unfinished business from last year, partly because of the impact of the pandemic, and also because the number of council members and the mayor that were at their end of term, and it gets very crazy in those last few months to try to get a whole lot of things done. And so we are picking up the pieces, and I think we're just about there to finish off that business so we can begin to embark on new things. Some of the things that will be coming from my office include a pay equity resolution. The city completed a pay equity study, and nobody should have been surprised. And in fact, we have some inequitable pay conditions in our city employees, despite our best efforts. Women, people of color, people that are raising children suffer a little bit through the system. The good news is that we've identified them. The resolution, which I hope the council will pass, will reaffirm our commitment to address them more assertively and be able to remove some of the barriers that really prevent people from accessing overtime or seeking promotions going forward. Some of the other things that I have had the pleasure of working with the League, especially through the Community Budget Alliance in the past, that I think might be of interest is the community planning groups. That is something the city is still very committed to, ensuring that voices from the individual communities still have a seat at the table, an alternative way for the public to stay involved. Although we've run into some legal problems that were identified last year, we're working through those with the planning department and the city attorney's office so we can resolve that and continue something that I'm very proud of that we've had here in our city for over 60 years now, a great way for the public to have a voice in city decision making. The other thing that I'm especially proud of, and something that the League introduced me to probably as much as 8 years ago, is participatory budgeting. That is an idea where rather than the elected officials make the decision of where we allocate our dollars, to actually have a process by which the public gets a vote for a limited amount of money within the overall budget to decide which projects, whether it be a park or a library expansion, some kind of new services going forward. So we're very excited about that. That's not in place yet. I hope my colleagues will agree. We hope that the mayor's office will agree with that. But that is something that I'm partnering with the other newly elected council member, District 9, Councilmember Sean Elo Rivera. So those are things that we're trying to respond to, some of the issues that I believe are important to the members of the league. We're also talking about a number of other issues. I think all of the council members were hoping to really address the low pay that we saw for city employees and try to make their pay compensation more competitive. As you know, city employees rank near the bottom. And unfortunately, so many years have passed since they've gotten salary increases. We were only able to do so much. But as the mayor points out, this is a turning point in the conversation to ensure that our city employees are paid equitably and competitively, because at the end of the day, the city is really a service organization, and service is delivered by our employees. And we want to make sure that we continue to retain and recruit the very best. I'm very proud of the 10,000 plus employees we have. But at the end of the day, people have to be compensated fairly to ensure they can have and enjoy a good career here at the city. I'm not going to talk about every issue because I know my colleagues will want to tackle some of them as well. The other part of it that I know a lot of us are interested in, as Councilmember Von Wilpert mentioned, is infrastructure. There's been a lot of good media coverage about how far behind we are in infrastructure. And while we do a pretty good job with our public sewer and water projects, which are of course funded by the ratepayers, we are woefully behind schedule when we're talking about streets and sewer, storm drains, parks, libraries, etc. The hole is so deep, it's going to take a while for us to crawl out of it. But again, I think we have the right council and the right mayor's office to be able to tackle that going forward. And I'm going to be one of those elected officials that says we're going to have to find new sources of revenue to be able to do that, because no matter what our city revenue sources are, we're just not going to be able to generate enough to be able to tackle that. And I think that's one of the promises that we've made to the residents and businesses of San Diego, is to be able to deliver that infrastructure and ensure our taxpayer dollars are being used very wisely in that regards. There is so much more to talk about, but I'll leave it to my colleagues to fill in some of the other areas. Thank you again to the League for this opportunity to introduce ourselves and some of the policy measures that we want to drive forward. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you again.
Thanks very much, Councilmember Lacava. Council President Pro Tem Stephen Whitburn is chair of the city's Land Use and Housing Committee, vice chair of the Budget and Government Efficiency Committee, and a member of the Rules Committee, the Public Safety and Livable Neighborhoods Committee, and the COVID-19 Response and Recovery Committee. He also serves as Mayor Gloria's alternate to the League of Cities and the MTS Board of Directors, and sits on the Air Pollution Control District Governing Board and the Regional Task Force on the Homeless Continuum of Care Advisory Board. Addressing the city's homelessness and affordable housing crises are top priorities for the council member, along with ensuring a just and equitable recovery from the pandemic and a more sustainable future for San Diegans. Before being elected to public office, Council President Pro Tem Whitburn worked at the American Red Cross, the American Cancer Society, and he worked to advance equality for the LGBTQ community. Council President Pro Tem Whitburn, please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Kim, and good morning, everybody. It's really good to be with you. I represent District 3 on the San Diego City Council. So District 3 is downtown, Balboa Park, and the neighborhoods all around it. So it includes Little Italy and Old Town, Mission Hills, Middletown, Bankers Hill. It includes Hillcrest, University Heights, Normal Heights, North Park, South Park, and Golden Hill, neighborhoods that many of you are very familiar with. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. Thanks both to Kim and Lori for the invitation. You know, my mom continues to be very active in the League of Women Voters. She lives in upstate New York. She's been involved. In fact, I grew up in a League family. She was the treasurer for a number of years. So I've always had just a tremendous amount of respect for the civic engagement and community outreach that the League of Women Voters does. So it's a special privilege and joy to be with you today. As Kim mentioned, you know, my background is pretty varied. I actually had a first career in journalism. I did radio news for 16 years in Albany, New York, and then Madison, Wisconsin, and then here in San Diego. And it was really that. I covered a lot of local government, city councils, county boards, and that is where I really got interested in those local government issues, understanding the way government works, the different issues, the way the different elected officials were approaching them. And of course, I thought I could do a better job. So I was very interested in following that. And then after 9/11 happened, it turned out that the American Red Cross, the blood services here in San Diego, was looking for somebody to do their public affairs. They had a huge rush of blood donors after 9/11 and didn't really have anybody in public affairs locally to be able to work with the news media about it. So I ended up working with them. I was with the American Red Cross for 10 years, and then most recently was the director of the American Cancer Society for Southern California, and have really enjoyed the nonprofit experience as well. A number of things led me to run for this seat. I mentioned the just natural interest I had in local government from the years that I spent covering it in journalism. But I've also lived here in District 3 for 20 plus years now. And you know, I have the same observations as everybody else. You know, there are a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness more now than I've certainly seen in the past 20 years. Some of our streets are in really bad shape, and the city never seems to have enough money. And so I felt that my background gave me a pretty broad perspective to be able to try to address some of these issues. One of the other things that I've noticed is it seems to me like, and more so in San Diego than in other places I've lived for whatever reason, some of these local issues turn into really bitter fights when I don't think they have to. Oftentimes, I think people find out about issues in their neighborhood when the decisions, for all practical purposes, been decided, and people don't like that. People want to be informed early on about what's going on in their neighborhood and have an opportunity to authentically contribute to the process. And you know, oftentimes people don't take the time to listen to other perspectives, and that's something that I've always thought was important. I really try to hear the different perspectives, start from a place of assuming that everybody is trying to do the right thing, and then come to some sort of a compromise or agreement about the best way to go that everybody can live with. And that's one of the things that, you know, I really like about Councilmember Campio, Councilmember Lacava. You know, they, I think, take the same approach. You know, none of us are flamethrowers. We all, I think, are good listeners. We're all pretty thoughtful. We all want to work together. And, you know, that's pretty true of the whole city council. I mean, we've got a good city council. I think we have a good mayor. I think we have a real opportunity to get a lot of things done. You know, some of the issues that I'm particularly going to be focusing on and have already been focusing on, one of them certainly is homelessness. District 3 is the epicenter of our homelessness crisis, although it is certainly a big issue in every single district around the city. And, you know, we have a moral obligation to help our brothers and sisters who are suffering on the streets. You know, I live downtown, I work downtown, I see this humanitarian crisis every single day. It's a complex issue, but it is one that I believe that we can make significant progress on. I was very pleased to see in the mayor's budget that he has put forward that the council is in the process of considering that he is going to be creating a homelessness strategies department. And he's adding funding for housing and services that I think are going to be really important. There's three basic things that we have to do if we're really going to solve the homelessness crisis. And I think that eventually we can do that. We need to prevent homelessness where we can. We need to conduct outreach to people who are currently unsheltered. And then, of course, we have to provide solutions for those folks. There is more money in the current budget for prevention. Rapid rehousing, where the government will provide some funds to somebody who is about to become homeless. And make sure that they have that rent for another month or another couple of months so that they can stay in their place. Because if you can keep somebody from becoming homeless, that goes a long way to prevent the chronic homelessness that is so hard to reverse in many instances. So prevention is, of course, key, preventing the problem from becoming worse. And in the outreach, I think we are seeing a shift in San Diego for the better in how we conduct outreach to the unsheltered population. For so many years, we've depended on our police department, our police officers, to be the front lines of outreach to the unsheltered population. But a lot of people are intimidated by somebody walking up to them with a gun and a badge. Certainly, our police officers themselves have plenty of work that they need to be doing. So we are shifting to having social services workers, nonprofit workers, reaching out to the unsheltered population. And we are already seeing some real success stories with that. And so we're expanding that program. There's more money for that in the budget. These social services workers who can connect with the unsheltered individuals, really develop a relationship with them, build trust, let them know about the housing, let them know about the services that exist. And that's the way that we're really going to make progress there. And then, of course, there are all the solutions that we need. We need more shelter beds. We're adding some of that in the budget. We need to build more affordable housing. We've been working on that. We've added a number of units of affordable housing already this year. Mental health services are going to be very important. A number of folks, not all, but some of the folks who are unsheltered have a need for mental health care, a need for addiction counseling or addiction care. And so we're going to be working very closely with the County of San Diego, which tends to provide most of the health services. And we're building a really good relationship with the county right now. You know, we've got a great opportunity to get a lot of things done, because if you look at the political landscape right now, there is a lot of alignment between the city council and the mayor, the state legislature, the governor, the federal government, the president. I mentioned the County Board of Supervisors. We're all focused on a lot of the same issues, including homelessness. So I think it's a real opportunity for us to come together and make good progress on those things. I mentioned housing affordability. We talked about the COVID-19 response that I think that we've done a lot of good things. Just recently, we expanded the opportunity for outdoor dining and making it easier for people to eat outdoors. People really love that in San Diego. It's good for the businesses, it's good for the patrons, and we're going to be exploring ways about possibly to make that permanent. And then, of course, there's a lot of other issues that Councilmember Lacava just talked about. I know Councilmember Campio will be sharing some, and I look forward to your questions as well about what's important to you, and look forward to answering those questions. So thank you again for the opportunity, and look forward to continuing the conversation.
And thank you for your remarks. As a reminder to our audience, we are accepting questions. If you click the Q&A button in Zoom, you'll be able to type a question, and we'll get to the Q&A session after our next speaker. One second. Councilmember Raul Campio serves on 4 council committees and is chair of the Mission Trails Regional Task Force. He has several key regional appointments, including serving as Sandag's Transportation Committee Vice Chair, as a member of Sandag's Public Safety Committee, and as a member of the San Diego River Conservancy Board, which funds projects to prevent fires and flooding along the San Diego River. He believes that the city must provide a strong economic environment for families to be able to afford living in San Diego provide their children with opportunities, and build social cohesion across diverse communities. Now we'll hear from Councilmember Campio.
Thank you very much, Kim. First, I would like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to address your group with two of my new colleagues, Councilmembers Lacava and Whitburn. We're all adapting to our new job here, which we've been in for 6 months now. And I'm just going to talk quickly about the goals that I've set for my office and what I feel we've accomplished so far, which is quite a lot, actually, given how much we've been facing with COVID. But first, just note how impressed I am with the League and why I feel you're so vital to preserving our democracy, especially at the local level. I've found so many voters reached out to my campaign and other campaigns after consulting the Voters Edge platform hosted by the League with the information about the candidates. And it's often a voter's only source of information about a candidate on their ballot before they vote. And it's just really fantastic that you provide the unbiased and nonpartisan and free resource to the community and for the candidates to be able to get their message out as well. I particularly like that you don't have too much of a character limitation, so we could write a lot about ourselves. But ultimately, I know you are nonpartisan and really are just there to inform voters. So thank you for that. Lastly, before I just wanted to say that, we know the League of Women Voters is really important to just stronger democracy as well. And you hosted 2 debates in my district. And so I really appreciate that as well. As many of you know, I was elected in November of last year to serve as the council member for District 7 and in the city of San Diego, which includes neighborhoods of Allied Gardens, Del Cerro, Grantville, Linda Vista, Mission Valley, where I live now, San Carlos, Serra Mesa, and Tierra Sana. I myself was born in San Diego, raised in El Cajon, and attended Uni High School in Linda Vista, which today is now Cathedral Catholic High School. And after being a teacher and then an attorney, both in private practice and as a prosecutor in the city attorney's office, I ran, and I'd say that thanks to the 2 debates that the League of Women Voters hosted for my constituents, first in the primary at Cuberly Elementary School in Serra Mesa, and then virtually for the general election, I have the honor to represent a district full of wonderful neighborhoods, a key regional business hub in Mission Valley, and nationally recognized partners like San Diego State University and their new stadium and campus and housing they are building at SDSU West. With that, I'll say thank you to Councilmember Lacava for pushing so hard for that back in 2018. I also chair the Economic Development and Intergovernmental Relations Committee and sit on 3 other council committees: Budget and Government Efficiency, Public Safety and Livable Neighborhoods, and the Rules Committee. And you mentioned I chair the Mission Trails Regional Park Task Force, where I sit alongside Councilmember Lacava. In my opinion, Mission Trails is San Diego's finest and most beautiful park, even if Councilmember Whitburn protests that that designation belongs to Balboa Park. We might not have museums, but we have a mountain. See, Stephen, you said I'm not a flamethrower. How about them flames? I also sit on the San Diego River Conservancy Board and work to improve the canyons and creeks and the river itself through conservation, fire prevention, and water quality improvement. No flamethrowing for the canyons in Serra Mesa and Del Cerro, please. Since being in office, I became aware of another crisis in our city that our city can actually do something about. It's the lack of affordable quality childcare for working San Diegans. And recent trends in San Diego have shown that we're a less family-friendly city, particularly 3 distinct trends: the decline in school enrollment rates, a decline in the female labor force participation, and a decline in birth rates, which all show that families are choosing to either forego creating families in San Diego or waiting longer or moving to other places where they can more affordably start and raise their families. So to address this, first, I called on the mayor to include in his fiscal year 2022 budget a new office within the city administration called the Office of Child and Youth Success. The office will be a hub for our region to help parents find affordable quality childcare, as well as physical activities, educational activities, and internship opportunities for their children. Secondly, I've taken another step to address that childcare shortage head on. And as I mentioned earlier, as chair, I'm the chair of the Economic Development and Intergovernmental Relations Committee, and childcare is absolutely an economic development issue, and we weaken our workforce when folks have to exclude themselves due to the lack of affordable childcare, particularly as rent and house prices skyrocket. It just becomes less and less affordable to live here. So with that in mind, yesterday at the committee, I requested that the city's real estate assets department conduct a facilities assessment of city-owned property to determine where we can either place more affordable child care services or construct more. In particular, we had a press conference earlier this week in Linda Vista on city-owned land that EES, a nonprofit, runs childcare in Linda Vista that serves all of San Diego. It's 9 districts. And that action on yesterday passed unanimously. So we're going to see some improvement on this front. I asked the department to report back their findings to the committee in 6 months, and they have agreed to do that. And so I look forward to reviewing those results and just advocating for a brighter future for children and families in San Diego, regardless of their zip code. I spoke earlier about the Office of Child and Youth Success, which is one thing I am very strongly advocating for inclusion in this budget. And that is a major thing. And I really appreciate my fellow council members who are here today for advocating for that before as well. They both had it in their budget priority memos, and I really thank them for championing it as well. They deserve a lot of credit for that. And as I said earlier, before coming to City Hall, I worked in the city attorney's office. I was a deputy city attorney in the criminal division. And there, part of my work was that I was on a small team known as the Gun Violence Response Unit, which is a flagship team that has been nationally reported as obtaining gun violence restraining orders at the highest rate seen in California under our red flag laws. And City Attorney Mara Elliott deserves a ton of credit for creating it. And I really appreciate that I had the chance to work on that team to secure gun violence restraining orders, taking firearms out of the hands of those who are a danger to themselves or the community. In particular, the very high percentage of individuals who threaten to commit suicide. So we are really protecting a lot of people who would carry out harm on themselves. And so it's a really important team that we have. And I was proud to do work on that team, but unfortunately, we're seeing an uptick in gun violence throughout California and in San Diego. And of course, we all know the tragedy that happened so recently in San Jose. And so I'm a strong advocate for full funding of that unit, expanding it, in fact, because so many other jurisdictions throughout California have asked the San Diego team to travel and teach their agencies on how to go about obtaining the search warrants, working with law enforcement officers, working with school districts to find those red flags and then use the civil court restraining order procedure to get it. So I really want to see us fund that as well. Reflecting more on District 7 priorities, particularly capital improvement projects in my district, the first and foremost is the San Carlos Library, which for 30 years, since Judy McCarty was pushing for it, the residents there have been waiting for their renovated library, and the project is going to require about $25 million to expand it to what the plans show. So that's a major undertaking. It's a multi-year task, but it is my top priority over the course of my first 4 years, and my team's been working very hard to get that done. Libraries, generally speaking, they serve as an invaluable resource to our students and families and all community groups. And the San Carlos Library is something that will really serve that eastern part of the city so well. As a former teacher who really thinks about my former 5th graders every day, I know students of mine who were only able to succeed because they had that public resource in their local library where they could wait for their parents after school, get internet access and the books that they really needed. And so our city really should invest in our students and our families in that way. Last but not least is the San Diego River, which runs practically entirely through District 7 before flushing out into Mission Bay in District 2. And that's just a natural resource that hasn't been prioritized in a long time. So environmentally, we need to protect the flora and fauna and the species there. The water quality, of course, affects the health of our beaches. The businesses who exist along it and have to and want an attractive natural resource there that can really be improved with parks and recreation and the river park walkway that I'm working together with Mayor Gloria and Supervisor Nathan Fletcher to find a funding mechanism for. I think we're going to have some really good news on that shortly as well. And then, of course, homelessness along the river, which so many folks have gone to the river because of the fact that they can find a place of privacy and just so that they can have a place to set an encampment up away from the beach and other areas. And so many folks live along the river, and I really want to help them get the homeless services that they need, particularly by pairing up with the San Diego River Park Foundation and PATH. And I know that Councilmember Lacava and Councilmember Whitburn are big champions of PATH as well. So With that, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. My door is always open to the league to hear your ideas and proposals of how we can strengthen democracy here in San Diego. And I really just appreciate everyone for being here today. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me in my office directly if you have any questions or concerns. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Campio, for your comments. It was interesting to hear about your work with the gun violence restraining orders. Our organization held a community event on that topic a couple years ago, so definitely an important one. Now we do have some questions from our audience. Lori, do you have one?
I'd like to first take a step back. Earlier in this program, I invited our elected officials to introduce themselves or identify themselves in the chat. And I want to recognize Dr. Michael McQuarrie. He is the elected school board member with the San Diego Unified School District. So I just wanted to recognize him and his work, his public work with his community in that regard. So I'd like to start with the first question regarding something that almost every one of our panelists, including our recorded council member, has referenced, and it is the Office of Youth and Children and Youth Success. So as you all know, because hopefully you all received a letter from me this week, asking you to support this and advocating for it, I'd just like to get your sense of like what do you think is the opportunity for success with that, the opportunity to actually institute this? I know budget constraints are an issue right now. I know that last year's situation skewed a lot of opportunities to move forward in certain areas, but I know 6 council members did put that in their budget priorities. And I'm just curious to know next steps with you and advocacy opportunities, et cetera. So can all or one of you speak to that, please?
My fellow council members don't mind, I'll just say that I feel like we just have to get the votes at the June 14th final budget meeting. It wasn't in the original proposed budget. It wasn't in the May revise of the mayor's budget, but it really comes down to that day. And I think that as many media outlets have noted, a $350,000 ask for something that is such a critical investment and really will pay off for itself, because part of what it's going to do is find philanthropy and other state and federal sources of funding for programs affecting children. I think that it's an investment that pays off in the short run and pays off in the long run. So it's really key that 6 people have written it in their budget memos, and that is I think, without going into more that might violate the Brown Act, I think we should stop there.
I'm hopeful as well. Councilmember Campio has been a real advocate for it on the 10th floor here. I included it in my budget memo, and I'm hopeful. And I think that, one of the real opportunities is the coordination that it will bring among city departments and other entities. Oftentimes you have a lot, and we see this in the homelessness space too, where you have a lot of entities or government agencies doing good things individually, but not taking advantage of the synergies that it can occur when you really coordinate efforts. And I see that this department would have a real opportunity to coordinate and make even more of the work that's being done for children and youth in our communities.
And I'll just add real quickly to the comments. I do appreciate the leadership of Councilmember Campio and Whitburn on this area, and should add that while the mayor didn't fund the office, the mayor has funded a number of programs, some of them first-time programs sprinkled throughout the budget. And as Councilmember Whitburn has mentioned, what we're looking for is really kind of an oversight of all that, making sure those programs are actually integrated and work well. And we do seek out additional state and federal grants that might be possible. And the other thing I'll mention is that I'm hoping for the reactivation of the Youth Commission, something that's gone dormant for quite a few years, and actually get the voices of the youth front and center. We've been talking with the folks at UCSD, trying to activate a conversation at that 18 to 24 age, to talk about the issues that they face as they come out of the universities and what they're looking forward to in terms of what the city has to offer. So I think there's well, once again, this is another one of these pivots that this new council and this new mayor are really bringing to the table that is long overdue.
Great, thank you all.
Okay, that's good to hear. Our next question regards criminal justice. Mayor Gloria has proposed 11 police reforms. Do you support a lot or any of them? Please explain why or why not.
Well, I'll jump in. So we'll take turns on this. I do support the programs that the mayor has put forth. I'm glad to hear that the police chief is in support as well. There clearly is an opportunity, a moment in time for us to make changes. We have to do them thoughtfully and carefully. Most of them are common sense. Most of them are ideas that have been advocated by nonprofits and community-based organizations for a number of years, and we can seize the moment to implement them. Public safety is the number one job of the city, any city, which is why our budget reflects more than half of our budget goes to public safety, police, fire, rescue, lifeguards. And so having served on the Police Community Relations Board, where we put forth a number of assertive ideas that haven't come take hold yet, we did vote for the forming the Commission on Police Practices. That was won by a large majority, and won by a large majority in every single council district. It tells us that people are really hungry for change and oversight. We have a lot of work to do to balance public safety with ensuring that every San Diegan feels comfortable in the presence of police. And we make sure that we are a low crime city and we keep it that way, but we respect the dignity of every San Diegan, whether they're homeless, no matter what neighborhood they live in.
And I would agree. I support the mayor's initiatives as well. And those will be coming to the council before too long. Of course, Councilmember Monica Montgomery Stepp chairs the Public Safety and Livable Neighborhoods Committee. So she'll be shepherding some of those through the city council. But I think there's broad support for these initiatives on the city council, from what I can tell. And of course, in addition to making the reforms, we also need to have the oversight. And that's another thing that the council has been working on, is the implementation of the Commission on Police Practices that voters approved with Measure B last November. And we have done a lot of work on that, implementing or appointing an interim executive director, an interim commission, and we'll be in the process of setting up the permanent commission during the course of this year, hiring an executive director and laying out some of what the work the commission will do. But I think that the city of San Diego is making a lot of progress in ensuring that we have a police department that has the confidence and trust and is responsive to the community.
I couldn't agree more with my fellow council members, and I think the important thing is to see the mayor's responsiveness and quick action on this. Eliminating existing civil gang injunctions, that's been done, and a lot of credit needs to go to the grassroots organizers and criminal justice reform advocates who pushed for that for a long time, and the mayor's done that in his first 6 months. One particular one that he's already proposed in the budget, which we'll vote later on in June, is removing the Office of Homeland Security as a program of the San Diego Police Department, and that's going to be its own standalone office now. Hearing comments from council members during the budget review process, the mayor even upped the funding that goes to the Commission on Police Practices after pointing out several aspects of it that could use a little bit more money. So I think that we're seeing a lot of these being implemented quickly. I understand that there's more negotiations to deal with related to, meet and confer as it relates to the Surveillance and Privacy Advisory Board ordinances, but those have been well underway, and I anticipate that we'll have those ordinances finalized this year, so that the public will know that we are monitoring and overseeing how our city agencies and police department use surveillance technologies, and that people's civil rights are protected. And that's a really, really big issue for me. And then, of course, just, as it comes to police hiring practices and ensuring we draw the right people to San Diego Police Department, I've worked with so many police officers through my time as a prosecutor, and know that we have some amazing amazing officers who do such a good job. And we want to attract people like that and keep them here and not lose them to the sheriff's office or Chula Vista PD or El Cajon or other municipalities. So we have a lot of work to do. It's going to take many years to get done, but many of these bullet points that Mayor Gloria put out in April have already come to fruition.
Great, thank you. I have another question that I'll put forth. Many of the questions I'm going to be asking are advocacy questions. As you noticed, the last one was about the formation of the new office. This question is presented on behalf of the league by one of our league members who is a longtime advocate of women's rights, women's and girls' rights. She is spearheading the adoption of an ordinance in the city council right now. And her name is Rosemary Straley. And so this is her question. Last year, the league mobilized 4 community organizations in a centennial commemoration coalition to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote. The unfinished business project this coalition undertook was enactment of a San Diego CEDAW ordinance. And CEDAW stands for Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Our league, on behalf of this coalition, submitted a draft CEDAW ordinance to the city council. And, as you know, last year, we actually submitted it right around the beginning of the pandemic lockdown. So it just kind of got mired in the process of a pandemic. And so we're just trying to follow up with that now. We believe and understand that the Office of Race and Equity will be responsible for implementing the CEDAW ordinance. And basically, we want to know how we and the other 4 community organizations that sponsored this CEDAW ordinance, what we can do to help you, the city council, put this into practice and adopt this ordinance.
Well, I would say that, the League of Women Voters is one of the most effective advocates in San Diego. I mean, it is a tremendously respected organization. So I think that, from the get-go, you have the ear of city officials. Communicating individually with the council offices, of course, is important. And then, the advocacy on the day when it comes before council is also important as well. I think you're going to find a very receptive city council with this particular set of council members. I am coming to know my council member colleagues pretty well. And, I think we have a council that feels very strongly about equal rights and ending discrimination for everyone. I'm a member of the LGBT community, so I've spent a good bit of time fighting for equality. I believe that it should be conferred upon everyone, of course. I was a vice president of the American Civil Liberties Union here in San Diego. So you have a very receptive ear here, and I think that's true of the other members of the council.
I'd say absolutely. I agree with Council Member Whitburn, and just, as I quickly pulled up what the particular articles of the convention are, I'm just thinking of the ways that my committee can do more on them, particularly the economic rights and economic development and intergovernmental relations. And I know that as a city council, we adopted our legislative agenda earlier in February for our state and federal lobbyists to go promote equal rights. And so it is the official voice of our council that we support the elimination of discrimination in the workplace and beyond in all circumstances. So I'm excited to see this come before our council in the future. And I just got to look up when you submitted it so that I can see what the current draft is right now, and we'll get working on it.
Yeah, and I'll just tag on quickly. That's, I think, one of the issues we'll be tackling as well in our pay equity resolution. But one of the things you can do is ask us this question right here and now, because we're all listening here. But yeah, to the league and the coalition and any other coalitions, it is really important to reintroduce these issues. You've got 5 brand new council members coming into a post-COVID. And so don't take anything for granted that something that was introduced last year will be automatically picked up And I can tell you, having been a student of City Hall for a number of years, one of the things that really excites me is how much the NGOs are really looking at building coalitions rather than pursuing issues individually. It makes such a more powerful statement when we see a collection of people that are willing to share in the idea and in the victory in moving these things forward. I agree with my colleagues that this is a council and a mayor, I think, that is going to be very receptive. Now that we've cleaned up a lot of most of the baggage from last year, we'll be able to tackle issues like this. So please give us a link to that ordinance and we'll fit it into the city council's agendas as quickly as possible.
Well, thank you. I will definitely do that. You'll be hearing from me and or Rosemary in the next week or so with that information and update on where we believe the status is, the latest version of that ordinance, and the steps we think had already been taken prior to this new council taking effect. So I'll definitely update you all. So I appreciate your help on that. Kim?
All right, switching gears now. Our Public Policy Committee works a lot on land use and housing issues, and one of the members of that committee has a question. What commitment can each of you make to increasing affordable housing, especially in large projects such as the sports arena area and Navwar?
I think that that is one of the biggest priorities of this city council. Every time we have a development proposal that comes before city council, we talk about affordable housing, whether it just barely meets the requirements or whether it is doing more than is necessary to meet the requirements. As you know, the city of San Diego has some minimum affordable housing requirements in any new development. And we pay very close attention to whether new development proposals include that, and we certainly encourage it. I think there have been some missed opportunities when it comes to including as much affordable housing as is possible. When we talk about, the Midway area, when the city is negotiating with developers on major projects, I would like to see the city use its leverage to ensure that as much affordable housing is included as possible, not just the bare minimum, but oftentimes developers will ask for exceptions to various rules. Well, if they're going to get exceptions, then we want more affordable housing. And I also think it's really important that we push for affordable housing for the lowest income families. Affordable housing can encompass, a large range, including, up to 80, 90, 100% of the area median income, which is, oftentimes a fair amount of the money. Oftentimes even, folks who are making the average income struggle with housing. But I do think that we really need to be ensuring that the people who are making, 30% of the area median income are getting the affordable income restricted housing that they need.
And I'll build on those comments because I completely agree with Council President Pro Tem Whitmer on that. The city has missed a lot of golden opportunities, although this council still is going to have an opportunity to weigh in on some of them. And whether you look at SDSU West, which I completely support and very excited about what's happening there, Tailgate Park, and now the sports arena property, city-owned land is probably one of the few tools that we have to really leverage. And unlike the philosophy of the past, which is let's get very attractive projects that will be a showcase or to get as much money in a land sale, we really need to tackle this problem of housing affordability and supply. And again, the land is. MTS has done a very good job to pivot, making their parking lots available for affordable housing or strictly affordable housing. And some of you may be aware that the state has a Surplus Land Act, and the state has recently pivoted and become very aggressive, saying that once a jurisdiction such as a city has declared some land surplus, that in fact there has to be an aggressive push for I like to use income restricted housing, so there's no doubt about what we're talking about on that land. And so while that's causing a little bit of consternation in terms of how that's going to be applied, in terms of whether it's a for sale or a lease of city-owned land, I'm very hopeful that, again, with this new council and this new mayor, that we're going to take a much more aggressive, we're going to stop looking for those sound bites about great projects. We're going to be looking at meeting the needs of San Diegans. It's still going to be a very tough conversation. We haven't solved the problem of how we can deliver income restricted housing, which requires so much subsidies to be able to be affordable. Somebody told me today that the increase in construction has been dramatic. Some of that is the effect of the pandemic in terms of supply lines, but the increase in just lumber it has driven the cost dramatically. I think it's now a 40% increase per apartment for just a cost of timber. And that's obviously not sustainable in so many different ways. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. I'm really looking forward to looking at everybody across the board to be part of the conversation. Sacramento, the BIA, Affordable, the San Diego Housing Federation, and so many more, and working with my colleagues to start to be able to tackle that. We've got a long way to go, but I remain optimistic that we're going to be able to address the needs.
I couldn't have said it better than my two colleagues. I think the key word in the housing issue is yes to more housing. That has to be the key there. And there's many ways to potentially get this done, but San Diego hasn't really done a lot of investment in alternative methods, of whether it's a 3D printed house by California-based tech companies, or pre-manufactured housing that is high quality and just cheaper, right? We can't continue to expect that we will solve housing affordability and homelessness if we're going to spend $400,000, $500,000 per unit. That's just not going to happen. And I'm encouraged that when I ask my staff, let's explore some of these alternatives, and I'm seeing companies in California that can build a 2-bedroom pre-manufactured home with a 3D printer in Northern California, and the total cost is $200,000 for a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit. I'm just thinking to myself, all right, let's get that down the freeway and let's put some of those here. So I really think that those alternative methods are really going to be the way we cut into the cost. That's the key thing. And so and I'd say that I'm really proud that neighborhoods like Grantville and Mission Valley and District 7 have really said yes to more housing, the community plans that were updated so that it would be easier and more streamlined to get housing. And I know that some of my constituents in Allied Gardens and Del Cerro and San Carlos suffer from the resulting traffic of that, but then that's on us to get the planning and infrastructure right. So making sure the infrastructure is in place for the housing that we need is also a big part of that problem.
Thank you. It sounds like the council is taking into account a lot of different alternatives and creative ways to address this problem. And while we're on this particular discussion, I do have a question regarding something more specific regarding affordable housing. Our organization deploys what we call Observer Corps. And these are individuals who go out into our public spaces and report back on meetings and discussions that have been had. So in reading some of our Observer Corps reports, we get a sense of, like, even if I can't, for example, attend your city council meeting, I can read about some of the major decisions that were made. And it's my understanding that on April 27th, there was a city council meeting that discussed the California Theater project. And there was, at that hearing, several council members noted a concern about the new phased-in inclusionary zoning requirement of merely 2% per year and phased in over, I think it was 10 years. And so I guess our organization and some of our members who were privy to that information we just wonder why, and want to encourage you to reconsider the ordinance. and requiring projects doing the building units on site to include 10% at 60% AMI. And rather than the 2% that I think that meeting agreed upon. So, the phased in aspect of requiring builders to identify and use a certain percentage of their new builds as low income or restricted income housing just seems like a slow way to address this exorbitantly looming and large problem. And I believe a couple of you actually commented on that during the meeting. So is there, like, do any of you want to address that? Either the speed at which we're requiring these new builds to provide, or the percentage of provisions for restricted income housing?
Sure, I'll be happy to start that. And I think that for those who watched that or city council meeting, you probably heard a little bit of frustration around the fact that the project was only required to have such a small amount of affordable housing. The intentions around that were good, though. So what that is a reflection of is a compromise that was made by the previous city council before the three of us were there. And the intent of the compromise is to require developers to contribute more to adding to the affordable housing stock. So the compromise that was negotiated requires developers to, when developers don't build affordable housing on the site of the project, it requires them to contribute more in what are called in lieu fees, contribute more than they were previously contributing. And in exchange for increasing the amount that those developers have to contribute to the building of affordable housing elsewhere, they were given something of a reprieve on how much affordable housing they have to build on site. It used to be 10% for every project, but as part of the compromise, it's what, I guess it's 2% this year and then 4% next year, and gradually goes back up to 10. I won't relitigate one way or the other. The compromise that was made, it was quite a negotiation that went on. I was not a part of it. I read about it in the papers like the rest of us did, and I know it was a lot of hard work that went into it. But that is the situation as it stands right now. We had a development project come before us this past Tuesday in Golden Hill that didn't require or have as much affordable housing as I would like to see in a new project, but it complied with the current rules. So there is a little bit of short-term frustration around that. Hopefully, in the long run, it will result in more affordable housing. But to your other point, Lori, I think you're right anyway, that doing affordable housing in 10% increments is going to be a slow way to get there anyway. I think what Councilmember Campio was talking about with modular housing and these other innovative ways and relatively inexpensive ways, that's how we're really going to close the gap in terms of building the affordable housing we need.
Well, and do you also think that, is it even possible to eliminate those in lieu fees? Because requiring builders to build affordable housing versus giving them the option to pay an in lieu fee, even if that fee is increased now versus, 2 or 3 years ago, it doesn't really get to our problem, which is housing. We need housing, we need affordable housing, and them paying an in lieu fee doesn't seem to benefit our community in that regard.
I will let one of my colleagues jump in on that if they would like to. I don't want to dominate the conversation here, but I am open to that. The in lieu fee, in theory, is designed to ensure that affordable housing units are built. That the in lieu fee, instead of building, whatever, 4 affordable housing units in my project, I'm going to contribute enough so that those 4 units can be built elsewhere. And the problem with the in lieu fee in the past was that it was cheaper to just give the money that was the in lieu fee than it was to actually build the affordable housing. So there was an incentive to do the in lieu fee because it was cheaper. The whole idea behind raising the in lieu fee is to sort of remove that incentive and make it more likely that a developer will build the affordable housing on site, or if they choose to do the in lieu fee, it's big enough, it's enough money that it will actually pay to build affordable housing. Now, one of the downsides of in lieu fees is that it doesn't result in the kind of integration that we would like. I think it's better rather than having luxury buildings and low income buildings, if we can have housing that has everybody together in one community. I think that's a better way to build a community. So by and large, I'm generally in favor of the on-site affordable, no question about that.
And I'll tag on to Council President Pro Tem Whitburn's excellent comments on this. Your observers may remember that in 2019, I was the only individual that attended the city council meeting and spoke in opposition, primarily because I didn't want anybody to celebrate. There was quite a bit of celebration that day because they had negotiated the compromise that the both of you have mentioned. And I said, this is all that we could achieve that day. Let's recognize that. But let's not celebrate because we're not tackling the fundamental issue of income restricted housing and affordability for San Diegans. And so I'm certainly looking at that. I think the other part of it is that there's also has to be a realization that affordability is a social issue, and we can't necessarily look to private interests to be able to entirely solve it. At the end of the day, these are not, I like to say, they're not home builders, they're business people. And the building of houses is the business they've chosen to go in. And if we pile too much onto their backs, that they're not going to be able to build housing at all, and they will go elsewhere. We talked earlier not only about lower income folks that are leaving San Diego because they can't get good paying jobs, they can't afford the housing that we have here, and are going elsewhere. While we continue to increase high paying jobs here and who we're attracting. But at the end of the day, what we're also finding out is that we're trying to encourage people to build in our transit corridors in our urban areas, and the home builders are unable to compete when land becomes available or being put on the market. There was a story that I heard this morning of a very nicely sited property that would have been great for urban infill, in which there were 24 bidders on the property. 22 of them were home builders, and the person that won the bid was actually an investor that will not be converting that property to housing, but will continue to retain the current use. And that's the problem that we're finding. And the challenge is that with the obligations that were put on private builders, they simply cannot afford, especially with the risk of what it takes to get the permits, how long it takes to put the financing together. And so we've got to be able to tackle this. How do we make sure that we incentivize the private home builders to be competitive in acquiring these urban infill sites while still meeting our social obligation to deliver income restricted housing? And I really will second my colleagues' comments that we've talked about mixed use for so long that now we're finally having the conversation about mixed income. To ensure that no matter what income range you're at, you really have access to everything that our city offers in terms of access to good jobs, access to good schools, to amenities that are part of our quality of life, and ensure that we really have the diversity of who we are as San Diego in every single neighborhood and community. It's a very tough conversation. I'm glad that we're finally pivoting to having a more serious conversation. We're going to have to make some tough choices going in, but I think this council and this mayor are prepared to do it.
Well, to your point, our league does support and advocate for mixed income housing. And so when you are ready and interested, we have a new housing action policy, in fact, that we've just adopted that I'll share that with you all as well in the coming weeks and let you know kind of where we stand and what our positions are on all of the issues that we've talked about here regarding housing, because it's all encompassed in there as well, including transportation and where to build, et cetera. So I'm happy to share that. And if we can find any places where we align and we can help move forward and coalesce around some good solutions, we'd love to help out with that. So Kim, next question.
Yes. Yesterday, the City Council voted to extend the franchise agreement with SDG&E for at least 10 years. Please explain your vote and your thinking about the eventual possibility of having a city-owned utility.
I'll go first. I voted yes because, and I think Councilmember, I'm gonna steal Councilmember Whitburn's very, very eloquently put line. I didn't see a better option by voting no, and I actually thought that there was a couple key changes between the last administration's contract and the current one that made this good enough to vote on right now. And I think that, and I think I heard at least a majority of council members on Tuesday say that we want the public power feasibility study that needs to come along, and and it was agreed to at least in principle right there on the record, so that 10 years from now we actually have the leverage that we need to make either a better decision or to get SDG&E to agree to many more of our climate action goals. The particular item that I focused on Tuesday was how at the 10-year mark, there now is, we can cancel for any reason whatsoever. Previous contracts always said that the city manager / mayor had to find by a preponderance of the evidence in collaboration with the city attorney that a material breach had been found of the bid, and then would have to recommend to the city council, and then it would require 6 out of 9 council members to vote to rescind it. Now it's at year 10. If we like what that public power feasibility study shows us, we can cancel the contract. And while there is a limitation in the amount of, or there's actually a clawback of the money that SDG&E can get back, I believe they said at year 10, it's roughly $24 million that they would get back of the 60 they would have paid us at that point. We would be making that decision 10 years from now because we see the upside of canceling it over the long term. And so I think that $24 million that we might lose 10 years from now is going to be peanuts compared to what we might gain. But that plan needs to be put in place first. I thought that particular term of the contract, from my legal training and background, was a rare term in such a big and long-term contract, that SDG&E was giving up a lot by allowing us to cancel for any reason. And so we, the council in 2031 is going to have a lot more power. And in the short term, we're going to get money in the short term. We're going to get millions of dollars for solar panels in low-income communities. And that money cannot be clawed back. That money is not part of the formula to get money back. And so and then the negotiations on the floor at the time also showed that we're going to get climate equity money earlier rather than later. So all in all, I felt that one component was really a game changer for me and gives the council a lot more power 10 years from now. And then I think that there's a bunch of other smaller particular details, issues like them sharing data with us and putting a lot of their own labor into helping us with fire prevention and climate issues to help our city staff that we don't have internally. There's no money value you can put on that, but from a professional perspective, that's millions of dollars of effort that they're going to be giving us. So the legal component, together with the leverage we're going to have now that we have an agreement on public power feasibility study coming through, and then the solar panel money was, in my mind, made it good enough for my constituents and for me. And so I voted yes.
I'll jump in. I was one of the 3 no votes on that. I want to commend the mayor and his team for a very aggressive negotiating position, starting out with the invitation to bid, and was able to put forth a contract, I think, much more assertive and in favor of the city and the ratepayers than one might have imagined. I think those of us who, as you know, it did require 6 votes to pass. And I think the comments by myself and other colleagues probably put enough fear in the SDG&E corporate thinking about whether, in fact, we could reach an agreement. As you know, the San Diego is about 40% of the service area for SDG&E. It does represent over $300 million in profit every single year. So incredibly important to their business plan. And I think we did our part to give the mayor much more leverage in trying to negotiate a very tough agreement. And then my colleague stepped up at the hearing on Tuesday and was able to gain even more concessions to that agreement that made it a much better agreement than one might have imagined would have been possible just a few years ago. And as my colleague mentioned, one of the challenges is, in addition to the 10-year point, we actually have termination rights starting in day one. But those termination rights, or as we began to refer to them as off-ramps, only exist to the degree that we have someplace to go. And as my colleague and others have mentioned, the public power feasibility study is really key to make sure that we can develop that as a viable option. It's going to cost us some time and dollars to really be able to prove that. And I also wouldn't dismiss the possibility that in a post-COVID era, that we actually should develop a marketing campaign and see who else might be interested as an alternative to SDG&E. You know, Faulkner's efforts were during the pandemic. Mayor Gloria's efforts were during the pandemic as well, and that certainly would have throttled any interest by outside parties. But there's also a possibility of getting alternatives. That's the key to enforcement and accountability of the very strict terms of the new franchise agreements, is to have real options on the table. But I think we are seeing a reset in the relationship. I think that's the hope that we all bring to the table. And my obligation, irrespective of how I voted, is now to work with the mayor and my colleagues to make sure that the accountability, the monitoring, the implementation of everything that Councilmember Campio mentioned really is done to protect our city, to protect the ratepayers and the taxpayers of San Diego. I'm very excited to start moving forward on that.
See, this is why it's such a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to serve with Council Members Campio and Lacava. I mean, regardless of the perspective, there's just so much thoughtfulness that I think is going into our city council decisions and respect. And, I really like that about this council and my colleagues. The approach that I took was, of somebody who would like to study public power. And in fact, in my budget memo, I've included a request for funding to do a study of public power. But we're not at the point yet where it's an immediate option for us to go to public power. We put the franchise agreement out to bid twice now, and SDG&E was the only bidder. So, if we're not going to do public power and there's only one bidder, then we're sort of left with SDG&E. And so, the threshold question, I think, becomes, is this the best deal that we can get from SDG&E? And that's an open question. I mean, none of us is sitting here with a crystal ball. I came down on the side of, well, I think, we've made a lot of progress. I think this is a much better deal than we had before. We've been working with a 50-year franchise agreement. This one is a 20-year agreement that gives us an opportunity to get out of it of our own volition after 10 if we choose to do it. And there's a number of other elements to the deal that Council Members Campio and Lacava mentioned. So, it's hard to know whether we could have gotten a better deal, but I think that if we had not approved this, I was a little uncomfortable with the financial uncertainty and risk that might have conferred upon us, particularly when we're in the middle of budget season. So I went ahead and I voted yes on it.
Following up on that, someone noted that SDG&E is actively hampering building electrification and is lobbying to do away with solar net metering. What makes you believe that SDG&E is going to be a good partner in achieving the San Diego City Climate Action Plan?
Well, so a couple of different questions. There's the one, so for me anyway, there's the question of what was the best deal immediately before us on Tuesday, of the options that were before us, what was the most responsible decision to make? And that was the question that I saw before us on Tuesday. That does not necessarily get into my concerns about whether SDG&E has been the best partner with the city in various different arenas. As I said, we can't go to public power, we can't go to another company at the moment. So we are working with SDG&E. I would like to see SDG&E partner with us more on expanding solar, solving some of the challenges around allowing the city to, string the lines for the pure water project that we need to move SDG&E's equipment. So there have been some conflicts. I don't know that we have eliminated those conflicts, but those are something of a separate issue because we had to strike a deal with SDG&E, in my view.
I just quickly to get to one of the points is the fight over solar. That's a reference to Assembly Bill 1139, and I know there's a lot of discussion about that right now as it relates to metering for the generation of renewable electrical generation facilities and exactly who bears the cost of that. Some people will say that as it stands right now, people with solar panels get a free ride, while those who don't have to subsidize that. And so there's a cost shifting element to that. I'm not exactly sure how that component really works. And so I don't have an opinion on that yet. But what I will say is that in this current agreement, on my urging, I asked SDG&E, said, where's your commitment to climate action? And I'd love to see you investing in solar panels for families that typically can't invest in them because they don't have the means for it. And now we're going to have at least $1 million a year for the next 10 years with rollover if we don't spend a full $1 million in a calendar year, so that low-income communities can have solar power generation, and that improves their property values and reduces their electricity bills directly. It's really incumbent on us as the city council to update the climate action plan. And then when SDG&E comes to one of its now 6 or 7 or 8 mandated committee and council meetings a year that we have in the new agreement with them, to say, why aren't you helping us do this better? Have the public call in and push them. And what I'll say is that the current line of executives at SDG&E have never had to face this process with as big a city as San Diego. And for them to go through this process over the course of 2-3 years and go through 2 bids, and then, the executives were on the line for the council meeting the other day, being pushed to accept changes on the spot. I think that the new executives there realize that this is not the same old council, this is not the same old mayor, and this isn't the same old San Diego. We're going to hold their feet to the fire like we promised to do. And, it's going to be incumbent on us to ask the hard questions and get the public behind us on these issues. But if it comes to the climate action issues, I'd say that $10 million investment right now is a good start, and we'll go from there.
And to add on to my 2 colleagues, I think the key is trust but verify. We go in as a new era, as both of them have referred to. There clearly is a realization that there has been some bad behavior. I had a conversation with Carolyn Wynn, the CEO, who was very candid that it is quite apparent that they could have been behaving differently, and she's really committed to making a change. And the good thing is having these franchise agreements that say, we trust you, it's a reset, but we're going to verify, as my colleagues have indicated, audits every 2 years now instead of every 4, a compliance committee oversight. The environment committee that I sit on will also be a very active participant in that. But the key, again, will be for us to have options going forward. There's also some new dispute resolution language in there so that we don't just have a disagreement and then have to leap into litigation. I appreciate Councilmember Von Wilpert getting clarification on the language, sections 8A and 8B about how that meant, because we were a little concerned about that. But time will tell, and the city has to be able to change and pivot. Again, so I think one of the things you're hearing this afternoon is a new council and a new mayor that, unlike in the past, where they just kind of rolled with the punches they were getting from SDG&E, accepting. We still have conversations about natural gas and how that gas franchise works. There is a very slow change that is going to come about that we didn't really tackle in the franchise agreements. I was a little disappointed that the agreement for electrical talked about electrification of city-owned buildings, was silent on changing the building codes to require electrification of all new construction. That is something that I still hope to work on. We have to be cognizant also of the good people who work in the gas field and making sure that there is a slow and thoughtful transition. People that have been working in the business can make sure that they can continue in their careers and retire comfortably, that there's enough of a runway so that people that are younger in the business can begin to see an opportunity to pivot into new parts of the industry. So these are kind of long and complicated situations that this council, I think, is prepared to tackle. But trust and verify is always going to be the key, and I think we have the sensibilities to be able to do that and integrate this whole conversation into climate change. And when we adopt the new climate action plan, the 2.0 that we're working on right now, that while SDG&E was a little reluctant to commit to something they hadn't seen yet, that when that comes out, we're going to have another conversation with SDG&E and make sure that they're in agreement with the bold vision that City of San Diego has always led on and will continue to lead on and do our part to fight climate change.
Great, thank you. Thank you all. We typically try to end these at 1 o'clock, and it is precisely 1 o'clock. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time and the rest of their day. I want to talk to our attendees briefly and just note that our council members here have invited us to engage with them. They've asked me, and I'm sure they extend to you attendees as well, the opportunity to call them, call their offices, email, etc. So please be activists. I've looked at the participant list here. I see a lot of people on our participant list as activists. So feel free, reach out to these council members, reach out to your representatives and make your voice heard, advocate for the things that are important to you and your community. Our council members here have demonstrated a great ability and willingness to listen to us and hear what we have to say and explain their positions on things. And for that, I want to thank all three of you for your patience today and your willing to talk to us and engage with us. And I look forward to doing it again very soon. So thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Oh, and by the way, fill out the, in your chat, click the survey form to fill out the survey on your experience here with this meeting and give us some feedback on how you think we could improve going forward. So thanks again, everyone. Thank you to our council members. Thanks, Kim, for helping run this meeting. And we look forward to seeing you all again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Have a
much,
good day.
Kim and Lori. Have a great day.
Thank you.